So today we are going to have a quick video on how to replace fork seals on a conventional motorcycle fork. I opted to tear these forks down and cerakote the lowers, then replace the fork seals. The first step was cracking the bottom Allen bolt loose with an impact while the fork was still assembled. Then I used a socket to take the top cap off of the fork and proceeded to drain the oil and remove the inner component. It is crucial to remember what orientation these parts come out in, as you will want to be reassembling them in that exact same order. So I've taken the step to lay down a rag and lay down these parts with the upward facing orientation in mind. I was able to begin removing the dust seal from the fork. For this, I used a small flathead to create a gap, then a larger flathead to actually remove the dust seal. After this, I removed the small circlip that's holding the actual fork seal down. At this point, I was able to use the fork as a slide hammer and break the fork seal, which was below the circlip, by using the fork stanchion and fork lower kind of in conjunction as a slide hammer. You're able to break it free. This first one separated really early. It came off surprisingly easy, likely because of how toast the seals were on this side. At this point, you can remove the fork seal from the stanchion. I cleaned out the inside of the fork tube and stuffed it with a towel. This is a bit of a side note. I'll be cerakoting these fork lowers, and if you're interested in seeing that process, I will have a link to that video in the description. After plugging up the bottom hole, stuffing a towel in it, and taping up the top, we are able to move on to the next fork. This last step was something you don't need to do if you're not painting or sandblasting these fork lowers like I am. So here I'm using an inner tube in my vise, almost like a soft jaw or whatever. I'm just kind of tightening it and twisting the fork stanchion at the same time to assure that I'm not over tightening the vise. Made it a lot easier to use a socket and pull that top cap off of the fork. After I pulled off the top cap, I was able to drain the oil out, take out the spring, the spacer, and the washer. Then I'm working off the dust seal in the exact same way with two screwdrivers, one small, one large. And removing this circlip with a small flathead, being sure to slide it up over the fork stanchion to prevent pulling it off and scratching it. This one was a bit more normal. I'm sliding it out using the slide hammer motion, and there you see my fork seal and the spacers clips below it. Giving these a quick wipe down with degreaser, but here's the reassembly. This is the piece that Allen bolt will thread onto. So you'll reinsert that where it goes, as you saw. Slide it in, being sure that washer is flat. After attaching that Allen bolt, I will use one of these seal drivers from this universal kit to hopefully slam that washer down into place. When I can see enough room for the circlip and the fork seal, I remove the seal driver and here I am going to open up these fork seals. These are All Balls Racing fork seal replacement. Works on a ton of bikes, is a very common fork diameter. And I will gently, carefully slide this over. This fork stanchion has a bit of fork oil residue on it, making the job a little bit easier, but certainly does not hurt to use some fork oil and lube this piece up as you slide it down the stanchion. After pushing it down about as even and as far as I can get it into place, I'm actually sliding an old fork seal on top of it to protect the new one. And I'm going to, in a very bad position for you guys to see, I'm going to use this seal driver and slam the 2 fork seals down together, pushing the lower one into place. Then remove the bad fork seal and go about working my way around with the circlip. I did not replace the circlips. They were a little bit rusty. I just did my best to clean them off. So here we are, still working the circlip into place. And once your circlip is in place, you are then able to reinsert your dust seal over the top. Now, this piece is pretty hard rubber. It's a little bit harder than the fork seal itself, especially in this kit, so feel free to lube this piece up with some fork oil or rubber lube and just slide it down. Takes a bit of muscle and a little bit of elbow grease to really get that dust seal into place. So after the dust seal is in place, I'm going to reinsert the inside components in the exact same order and orientation that they came out in. Starting with the spring, then the washer, being sure I have the up direction facing up. And this fork has a spacer. Some may not. I'm just double checking this washer because it's possible for it to turn sideways in here. And you want it right up against the top of your spring, in between the spacer and the spring itself. Check it that you have everything lined up right, feeling a little pressure. And you are good to fill it up with fork oil at this point and screw the top cap back on. I will not be filling these forks up on camera because I have some Loctite on this bottom bolt, and I plan to just kind of wait overnight, let that Loctite harden up, and then fill the forks to the recommended specification. Here I have just tightened up that Allen bolt on the fork leg, and I'm twisting the cap on just to keep everything tight until tomorrow I go about torquing this down to the factory spec. Here is fork lower number 2. Now I'm blowing these out. I cleaned them prior, but since they went through a sandblaster, I blew them out with the air compressor. I am carefully trying to reattach the Allen bolt to the piece it comes on. As you can see, it got stuck up into the fork stanchion, making it impossible to thread on. So here I go again, trying to be sure I have this piece that the Allen bolt threads onto perfectly lined up with the piece inside the fork stanchion. Pushing that all down, I'm able to screw a couple threads on it with the impact, then pull the stanchion out and hold the two together, tightening it down a little bit more. I will torque this down once the fork is all reassembled, just like the last one. Here I'm using the fork seal driver to bang the washer down. Then I've slid the actual fork seal over, and I am banging that into place. Now I will reattach the circlip into its proper location and squeeze the dust seal down onto the top. I'm like really using my fingertips here. It's not that comfortable. It's kind of a thin ledge that you can push down on. Trying to get some body weight into it and seat that dust seal in its exact location. So there you have it. I hope this made it a little bit easier, maybe a little bit less daunting. We're basically all the way done. I'm just really putting in the spring at this point. Going to be sure that washer is in the right orientation. You need to have the stanchion pulled out or else the spring will not go all the way in. So now I'm just double checking the washer seats right on top of the spring to go in between the spring and this spacer. In goes the spacer. Check that you have some spring in there. Now I'm just pushing the top cap against the spring and trying to get a few threads on. After a few threads are on, you can easily spin into place. And tomorrow I'll fill these puppies up and they're good to go. Thanks so much. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video.